Hello everyone, it's Silvia. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at 13 underrated mass market decks. And because we're still in Spooktober, of course, these decks will be... Okay, so we're going to have a look at these 13 decks. Obviously 13 because, well, you know, that's the number you want in Spooktober. And I believe there's 7 tarot decks and 6 oracle decks. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a tarot deck and then I'm going to switch and alternate. Let's see how it works. So the first one I wanted to talk about is a deck that I doubt a lot of people have. It's such a pity. It's this one here, but let me just zoom in because otherwise we won't see anything. It's the Dark Angels Tarot. This is a deck that was published a few years ago. And admittedly, when it was published, it was one of those years in which Los Carabel was sticking to a theme. I don't know if you've been collecting for a while, if you know about Los Carabel's decks, you will remember that sometimes it feels like they want to release all of the decks that have with the same theme all at once. And so there were a few decks that were kind of similar in theme, or at least in vibes, as to this one here. And I think that because of that, it might be as a result of this that people didn't necessarily have the opportunity to know about this deck. I'm just going to try and find the year in which it has been released. Maybe it's inside the guidebook. So anyway, these are the backs. And I mean, already starting from the backs, I fell in love with this deck because it's so beautiful, but it's also really, really dark. So the Dark Angels Tarot, the premises are amazing. Honestly, it reads like some kind of a dark romance. It actually is a dark romance if we, read between the lines. Basically, the story goes that the creator, at the end of time, just decides that there's nothing left to do for Earth. And so, heartbroken, he decides to just let it rot, basically. Thank you for that. And he tells everyone to just let all the humans die in due course and just not even try and save anything because there's nothing to save. But there's a group of angels and they just decide to disobey, and they decide to descend upon Earth and just try and, ferry away, so carry all of the remaining humans away from a dying Earth. But as soon as they descend upon Earth, they actually fall in love with it. And they decide to stay. So they become, they dress like humans, they mingle with humans, they become like the Nephilim of old. And this is obviously a really fantastic premise because it tells you that there's still hope. There's still the acknowledgement that something has gone horribly wrong on Earth, and everything looks, like it's pointing towards decay and the end of days. But it doesn't mean that these days will not be, there won't be still love to be found amongst the ruins. And so the concept is really interesting. As you can see, it is a bit of a dark romance. So it's once upon the earth, clothed in bodies like onto doors of mortal men, the dark angels become seduced by the lures and snares of the flesh. Like the Nephilim of old, they fell in love with humanity and with all it meant to be mortal. So on the one hand, it does remind me of City of Angels, which is a movie from a few years ago with Nick Cage and Meg Ryan. They fall in love with being human, with everything that it entails, because let's face it, it's not exactly a stroll in the park being human. I mean, we have all of these illnesses and we can get injured pretty easily. We're very fragile. And, sometimes we wake up with bad hair day. I mean, let's go through that, So I'm thinking they go from being perfect, because angels are supposed to be perfect, to be the most imperfect thing you can think of. And yet, They just love it. And I'm really fascinated by this concept. So obviously, when it comes to this tarot deck, you can really feel the vibes of this story behind it. It says the angels know the secrets of our hearts, the darkest treasures we keep there, locked in boxes bound with gold and steel, the horrors and the heartache, the truth we fear to tell, and the fears we cannot face, the hopes we'll not name, and the unspoken names we keep imprisoned in the depths of our souls. I think that this is a fantastic deck. The premises, as I said, there is something that literally seduced me when I was reading about this deck. And I think I purchased it not when it was released. I was also, like many others of us, distracted by the multitude of decks that were, they kind of looked similar one to the other. But then I was just doing my usual down the rabbit hole because I am always fascinated by angels. I think that on and off I've been really interested by angel lore for the good part of 20 years. And so, as I often do, I was looking into all of the non necessarily approved sources. And there's a lot of literature that talks about dark angels. There's different ways to interpret that name, and it is very interesting in and by itself. And so I actually stumbled upon this deck and I looked at it and I just immediately fell in love. I absolutely love the vibes. It is very gothic, and it does feel like these angels look like vampires. So there is that sensual component to them as well, because let's not forget it is talking about a dark romance. It is a romance that is not supposed to happen. It's something that is technically forbidden. It is something that it's going, against nature. I think we can say that. Obviously, I disagree, but I think that the way in which these dark angels were aware of disobeying to the law of creation, that was something that in and by itself probably represented something interesting and also seductive, because, there's always something appealing to doing something you're not supposed to do, doing something that is thought of as taboo. This deck, however, I think it's underrated because of another reason. Well, first of all, as I said, it was released without much fanfare. It's not something that has been advertised that much. But at the same time, when it was actually finally, under the radar of some tarot collectors and tarot readers, I have heard a lot of complaints about not the art style, which is absolutely gorgeous, but let's say the definition of the images on the cards. So let me just show you. This one is well defined, as you can see that. This one is well defined, you can see that. But for example, this one is a bit blurred. Now, I don't know if I can actually show you that through the lens. Obviously, naked eye in this case will be better. You'll just have to believe me on my word, but there's a lot of lines that are actually kind of blurred, or at least that they're not as defined as in other cards, and I'm just trying to find the worst of it. So this one, for example, if you look at the tower here, it looks almost as if it was just a first draft of a painting of a tower and it's not been finished. So this one, for example, is completely blurred. Now, I don't mind. I actually kind of find it endearing, in the sense that it just means for me that these angels, in the cards that are actually more on focus and sharper, it feels almost as if they completely embraced the possibility of being together with human beings. And whereas in the cards that you can see the images are a lot more blurred, in that case, they're still trying and see whether that is working out or not. And so it does tell a story. I am not following on any guidelines offered by the author. There is absolutely no mention of this in the guidebook. I actually checked. And, that is just my own interpretation. And of course, you may dislike this deck because of that. I do understand that having a bit of a mix in the art style, something that one card can be really sharp and the next card can be really blurry. I totally understand if you don't like this. But at the same time, I can assure you 100%, if you are willing to go beyond that, this is an excellent deck. This reads, it's obviously a darker deck, that it's what's supposed to be. It's about dark angels, but I promise you, it's actually a really good deck for a lot of introspective work, and I am definitely going to use it this month. And I believe that because of the reasons that I told you about, I believe that this is one of the most underrated tarot decks when it comes to the specifics of the darker vibes. I really love this deck. And now we're going to move on to an oracle deck, as I promised. So this one is the Alice in Wonderland Oracle. By Paolo Barbieri, also released by Lo Scarabeo, which means that unfortunately it only has, I believe, 33 cards, which is really a pity because when you like a deck, you want more cards of it. And if it's a tarot deck, of course, at least 78. If there's alternative card, it's even better. But when it comes to an oracle deck, we do tend to prefer at least 44 cards, 42, 44, please. This is something that Lo Scarabeo has not done. I think that every single tarot tuber that I know of, at least, really appreciates Lo Scarabeo oracle decks, but at the same time, we always have the same complaint. Why, when you're making an oracle deck and they are so gorgeous, they're so beautiful, why not giving us more cards? Because at the end of the day, it's also a bit of a pricey kind of deck. I mean, in Australia, obviously it costs more than in Italy or in Europe, I'm expecting. But, if you have to spend $45, $50 for an oracle deck, you're not necessarily happy that it only has 33 cards, you know what I mean? Even 44, you'll think about it twice, but at least 44, it gives you enough of a buffer zone to use it, for example, between two stacks of tarot cards and so on and so forth. But in any case, that I am not going to vent about that any longer. I have said that multiple times, not just me, many of us, and they're still not doing it. It's fine. Now, going back to Alice. I love Alice, the story, the book. I think that any adaptation on the big screen, for example, or, any kind of even short stories derived by Alice. I think that Alice is one of the most relatable characters of all literature of all time because she's so relatable. She's so relatable. Every time that she's not supposed to do something, she's doing it. And every time she's supposed to do something different, she doesn't. She just goes down the rabbit hole. She does not care about any kind of consequences whatsoever. She is friendly to everyone, even when she's not supposed to be. She's supposed to go back and tries to go back to her own, let's say, Earth, planet, where she comes from. And so she's supposed to be focused, but then she finds someone having a tea party and she's like, yeah, I'm going to join you because, I have time. I mean, probably not, but yeah, why not? She's not supposed to speak to someone and she does. She ends up being in so much trouble. And at the end, there's a lot of characters that actually, because of her, they're also in trouble and she doesn't care. She goes on and on. I love this deck in particular because I feel that there is a central component that is given to Alice that is not necessarily in the original story. And I know that is actually one of the reasons why this deck is underrated, or at least it's not necessarily a favorite amongst a lot of people. That is also because of that. I get it. I completely get it. This is not a 12-year-old Alice that is, dressed in all of the pinafore dresses and stuff like that. This is a teenager Alice, and she's exposing her midriff and stuff like that. If you find that triggering, if you don't like her, I completely understand. But on the other hand, I also believe that if you are willing to go beyond that, which is a representation that is slightly different to what we're used to, you will appreciate this deck a lot more. First of all, the graphics are really stunning, and I mean stunning. I mean, look at this, the Griffin, the card. This powerful card is just 3 colors, I think. 3 colors and the shades, sorry. I might actually zoom out a little bit. And all of the cards are just absolutely superb. The art style is amazing. I think it's not just beautiful, but also very evocative. We are witnessing scenes taken out of the actual book, but there is a flair to these characters that is not necessarily in the original. And so it is a choice. It's the choice of the illustrator, of the author of this deck. When I look even at the cards, for example, if we think about the description of the soldier/poker cards that we read in the original book, we would never get to visualize something this beautiful. But that is the reason why I've actually really fallen in love with this deck. And I think that it's underrated because obviously you need to like this kind of things. And as I said earlier, if this is not something for you, there's no way that it will become something that you like. But perhaps what if I told you that it reads really well? What if I told you that this is one of the decks that I actually really love? And for me, it is talking a lot about Halloween vibes, probably because of the story can be incredibly dark if you think about it. But also at the same time, there is that component of whimsical that is often associated to the darkness of Halloween. I really love using this deck, and it's one of the decks that I actually pull a 1 card spread out of. Sometimes I just look at it and it just resonates with me. Sometimes I have to go to the guidebook and read what it says, which is absolutely fine. Down the rabbit hole, of course. A Mad Tea Party. I mean, the Mad Hatter is actually sexy. I mean, there is that component in many of the characters depicted here. And I like it. I appreciate it. Certainly not the frogs here, but I really do appreciate this take on Alice. And I do believe that sometimes if we read between the lines, we can actually feel how seductive this story is. So this is absolutely a gorgeous deck. As I said, I would have loved for it to have at least 44 cards. And that's probably one of the reasons also why people don't necessarily appreciate the deck, but it is definitely underrated and I highly recommend it. Okay, going back to a tarot deck. So we're alternating this one. Absolutely. Oh my God. Why do people not appreciate this deck? I know why. And I understand. It's the Tarot of the Unexplained. So this one was by Dave Zilla. This one was released a couple of years ago, I believe. And it's a red wheel release. So it's a mass market. All of the decks that we're going to have a look at today are all mass market decks. And they are, I believe, all still available. So none of them is out of print. I'm pretty sure about that. Even the Dark Angels, because I believe it was from only like 5-6 years ago, not necessarily older than that, even though it might feel like it is. So the Tarot of the Unexplained, a deck of cryptids, ghosts, UFOs, and other urban oddities. I am a fan. I'm a fan of all of this, all of the things that are nominated here. Everything that is unexplained to me carries a charge that I just cannot resist to. And it's something that has been always like this for me. And it's probably my dad's fault. So my dad was, look at here, we are not alone. Of course not. So my dad was absolutely fascinated by everything that was unexplained. So you name it, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, but also, anything that, okay, let me explain something. My dad had a collection of books that were all about, how should I say this? The dark arts. In a Harry Potter kind of reference. So he had a collection of books by Peter Colosimo, who was a scientist of the occult. He had all of these decks, and he also wrote something about the Templars and the Cathars. He was fascinated by the Middle Ages, but he also studied Confucius because he really was into that philosophy. Obviously, because it was, when I started reading those books, it would have been probably the mid to late 80s. And no one was really paying attention to a kid reading those books. It didn't necessarily hide them. It didn't really keep them from me. I mean, they were in the bookshelves, so it was very easy for me to just reach. Okay. Now, just to say something, he did make the effort of putting them in the higher shelf, but it's not that difficult to pick a chair and just, step on top of it and just reach out for that. So yeah, it was really a lame attempt at hiding these books. And when I started finding them and when I started understanding what the theme was, I was immediately hooked because, books talking about myths and legends and supernatural myths and legends and Atlantis and the mysteries that you can find anywhere, the pyramids, the crop circles, the Nazca line. I actually went to Nazca because I wanted to see the Nazca lines. That's who I am. Stonehenge, hello. I mean, I went to Stonehenge twice, even though it was both times around my birthday, and I completely got frozen. It's so cold. Yeah. So, but even, Northern Scotland, Loch Ness, everything, to me, I don't know, I was always so fascinated by it. And a deck that talks about that is just, I had to have it. And it's actually really cool. It's a really cool deck. So, for example, now it is really cool, but let me just say something. I do not necessarily agree with all of the representation, as in the associations between the cryptid or the myth and legend or supernatural and the card that it's been chosen to represent in the tarot. I do not believe that La Llorona should represent the Empress. Like in this case, for example, it's number 3, so it's the Empress. I think that La Llorona is a Mexican legend story. Very, very sad. It's basically about postpartum depression. That's what we would generally think of this story nowadays. This mother unfortunately drowns her children, and she's heartbroken, and she's forever doomed to steal other families' children and take them with her. But because she lives in the sea, obviously she has to drown them. So it is incredibly sad. It is an incredibly sad story. What I do believe is that might, because she's a mother, so I do believe that there's a link with the Empress, but to me, that would read really well as the Empress reversed. A dark Empress reversed, but reversed nonetheless. So I don't necessarily agree, all the time with all of these cards. The Yeti is a hermit, of course, of course, and it's actually really brilliant. The Man in Black is Judgment Day. The Judgment card. I don't know why I called it the Judgment Day. And it's also brilliant because, in the story of the Man in Black, there's obviously that by story in which, is it called J or K? I forgot. Sorry. I think it's J, right? He just, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't watched it, but it is an older movie. But at a certain point, there is this sense of, finding an ending, finding a conclusion to the story. And, it's just really gorgeous, by the way, really, really gorgeous deck. Admittedly, in some cases, I had to go back to the guidebook because I wasn't necessarily immediately privy of what the image was telling me. And I completely understand if that's something that probably puts you off, but I can assure you that the guidebook is really great. So for example, let me just say something about the moon card. This is the Flatwoods Monster, and it's number 18. So if you go to number 18 in the major arcanas here, where is it? There was also a Wendigo, which is awesome. Sirius for the star card, obviously. That's the moon card here. The Flatwoods Monster, upright. So it does give you a few keywords for the upright and the reverse meaning. But what I wanted to talk about is the phenomena. So it actually tells you what this is about. Unusual or precognitive dreams, insomnia, voices whispering your name in the dark. The Flatwoods Monster is seen floating above a meadow. It is flanked by 2 tall trees representing the conscious and unconscious mind. Just as the traditional tarot moon card represents fear, anxiety, illusion, and our subconscious, the Flatwoods Monster appears to us in the same way. Seeming to defy gravity, this strange creature looks to be a spirit, an alien, and a robot all at the same time. This card can mean the querent is somewhat of a master in their craft, but they are doubting their abilities or suffering from temporary imposter syndrome. And then there's also a meditation with a few questions to it, deceiving you. What illusions are you facing? Are they real or in your head, or both? You may be your own worst enemy, blowing up the situation in your head. The word lunacy, that comes from luna, which is Latin for moon, came from Luna, the moon, which this card would be in a traditional deck. So let's talk about the elephant in the moon. It is a deck that offers you a darker interpretation. So it deviates slightly to the darker side from what we're used to as the traditional RWS. Well, that's one of the reasons why I've chosen to talk about it during the month of Spooktober. These are all kind of darker decks. We need darker decks. At least I know that in my practice, I also need darker decks. Regardless of the fact that I'm attracted to them, because let's face it, with all the horror books and horror movies that I watch, it's kind of a given that I'm also kind of attracted by darker decks. Loch Ness Monster, for example, that is absolutely awesome. If you go to Scotland, you have to go to check out the Loch Ness Monster. So what I was saying is, of course, we need to understand this. We need to understand that when we do a reading with this deck, it may veer towards the darker side. Should we use it? At times, it's probably not indicated to use a darker deck, especially depending on how we're feeling. For example, in this month of Spooktober, I will do a lot of deep dives into darker decks, but I also know, after experiencing kind of depression last year, at the end of October last year, I was not well, because sometimes you need to resurface after diving deeply into the darkness of a lot of things and issues. It is a good idea to actually resurface, to take a breath sometimes. So that's exactly what I will do this year, in this month. But it's also true that I needed that. I needed that because I actually faced a couple of issues. I finally found the courage to face a couple of issues that were still really, I was dragging my feet on them. And this year I have another couple of things that I have to face. Ghosts. Cool. And so I'm kind of hoping that all of these decks and my practice focusing on darker decks will help me face these issues, with the proviso that I will have to resurface every now and then. And this is one of the decks that I will use. I love by the way, I really love the aesthetics of the deck as well. It looks kind of it's the Tarot of the Unexplained. So obviously it's talking about all of these creatures, but it makes these creatures look like rock stars, for example. I mean, look at this card, the Nine of Ghosts. I really love it. Another reason why I believe that in some cases people would not pay attention to this deck and they will not consider it is because there is one suit in particular. The suit of Portals is a little bit peepish, and generally speaking, that would be a deal breaker for me. I'm going to be completely honest about it. I did say for other decks that I did not like that 3 suits were fully scenic and 1 suit was peepish. I think that, it makes me think that maybe the intention behind the creation of that deck was not complete. The vision was not there, and or maybe they had a deadline that was fast approaching, and that's not a way in which you make a good deck. However, in this case, I'm willing to go beyond that. I'm willing to just put up with it because the rest of the deck is absolutely fantastic. And when you think about the guidebook, for example, the 6 of Portals, just to show you, the guidebook is consistently, thoroughly well written and really extensively researched. So even though you may look at the 6 of Portals and think that it's very peepish, when you read the guidebook, it actually does give you a really interesting take on it. So the 6 of Portals, of course, 4, 5, and 6. So as always, the keywords: nostalgia, purity, generosity, happiness, reconciliation. Obviously, the suit of Portals is talking about the suit of water or cups. So it gives you the upright and the reverse meaning. The phenomena is seeing that thing you saw when you were a child that freaked you out. See what I mean? It's still referring to the nostalgia of something that happened when you were a kid, but at the same time, so it does reflect the meaning of the 6 of Cups, but at the same time, it does give you the possibility to look at it through a darker kind of lens. And so the new moon hovers over the sea. Directly below it, 6 egg-shaped portals emerge, huddled in a circle. There are alternating dark and pale portals. Unsurprisingly, the direction of energy flow is opposite between the dark and light portals. Scorpio sneaks over the portals like a serpent. Scorpio's natural silent and stealth indicate this sign comes in quietly. This card can signify a tendency to dwell on negative memories or experiences from the past, not just good ones, that can cause difficulties in the present. This book is brilliant. It's brilliant. Yes, it is a darker take on the 6 of Cups, but as far as darker takes go, you want this one. You want, this is it. This is it. You want this one. If you want to do shadow work, but you don't necessarily want a deck that deviates too much from the RWS, it's almost as if these cards were like the La Llorona for the Empress. These are giving you the reverse meaning of the cards. So I really love the idea that I can use this deck this way. And I have used it this way a number of times, and it really is good. It does not disappoint. Please understand, I know that, a lot of you would say it's not for me, and I completely understand that. But if you are interested in the occult, if you are interested in unexplained phenomena, this will be absolutely fantastic, a deck to add to your collection. Okay, moving on to an oracle deck. So this one is the Seasons of the Witch Samhain. In specific, I went with the Samhain. Okay, I live in the Southern Hemisphere. It's not Samhain for us, but I do still celebrate Samhain at the end of October. So be it. It's just, it makes sense. I specifically chosen this one because this was the very first that was published out of all of the Seasons of the Witch that Rockpool, released. This one is still with the, let's say, the Juliet Diaz, which was the illustrator of the first couple of these decks. Lorianne Anderson is a constant name in these oracle. Juliet Diaz and Lorianne Anderson are the ones that are writing, and Jada Rose, my apologies for that. Jada Rose is the illustrator of the first couple of these decks, and then they moved on to Tihana Lukovic, and I believe that she's the one that actually illustrated the most of these oracles. So we have all of the Sabbats, obviously, and I really like the idea that now they're actually releasing tarot decks, illustrated by Tihana Lukovic, and I believe also written by Lorianne and Juliet. And but there'll be only 4, I think, because they will be reflecting the season. So one that is already out that I don't have yet, but it's on my list, is the winter season of the Witch Winter Tarot, something like that. Sorry, I don't remember the title. So the reason why I have actually picked this one out of all the oracle of this series is because I believe that this deck, when it came out, it was incredibly popular. It was really, really popular. Everyone had it. Everyone had this deck. And then what happened was that people started realizing that there were a couple of things that were not necessarily resonating, namely the poem-like messages at the bottom of the cards. And every time that I talk about this deck, I have to admit that I actually struggle. English is not my first language and not even my second language. And so when it comes to the sentences that really feel like poems at the end, at the bottom of the cards, in order for me to fully understand them, I actually have to read them 2-3 times. And that means that I'm kind of getting out of the reading. Does that make sense? So, for example, Third Harvest, that's just the title of the card, let's say, Summer 38. And then it goes, Daughters of the Woods, feel thy sacred swell with suppleness. Taste the gathering of honey's milk filling your emptiness. I already read it the wrong way because I thought that feeling was a subject, a noun. Instead, it's actually a verb. So I will have to read it again. And so I will go, okay, Daughters of the Woods. Yeah, okay, so far so good. Feel thy sacred swell with suppleness. Feel thy sacred swell with suppleness. Okay. Taste the gathering of honey's milk. Filling your emptiness. I get it now. But that completely took me out of the reading. If I were doing a reading, if I was using it for a divination reading, if I was using this card in a reading for a client or for one of my members, I would be very ashamed and embarrassed because I would be like, I don't know what this means. I have to go to the guidebook. I would have to memorize it probably, but at the end of the day, even if I do memorize something, unless I keep on using it, I would probably not remember it. And that means at the end of the day, I don't feel called to use this deck. I have found a way to use it. Stick with me because I have found, if this also bothers you, I have found a way to use it. I just focus, it's kind of obvious. I don't even read the message and I know that I'm missing out. I am well aware of that. But if I use it in a reading or even for my own personal practice, and I want not to be taken away from the reading or not to be distracted, I just focus on the title and the image, of course. So All Hallows Eve, really beautiful. I love the fact that there's also this kind of smoke here because it does remind me of a ritual. So really amazing. Greet the Darkness, love it because it's very minimalist. Spider, gorgeous. Yes, I'm scared, of course I am, but it's really beautiful. I'm thinking about also, you know, the dignity of this figure. It looks like it's erect and proud of being what it is. And so I'm kind of taking a bow and looking at this card with a renewed interest because I kind of understand that there is something that goes beyond the jump factor of a human with spider legs coming out of her back, which is kind of creepy. Haunted. Look at the face, look at the expression, but also the tears, obviously, that we can see, but not just the tears. It's also this character feels like she's ancient, and maybe she isn't, but maybe she is because she's been going through so much sorrow. And so, you know, I started looking at the images on the card and I started just focusing on the keyword and completely ignoring the message or the poem-like message at the bottom of the card. And I just started really vibing with this deck. And now it's probably my favorite one out of all of the Oracle, Season of the Witch Oracle decks. Grief is one of the strongest cards that I've ever seen in my entire life. In all of my collection, I have a lot of really powerful, also triggering kind of cards. Let's face it. This one is triggering for me. But if you look at it, it is incredibly powerful. The fact that this character has just renounced, has just given up. It feels like there is this sense of giving up to grief and letting grief completely overwhelm us to the point that we are not even the master of our own body anymore, because clearly here these wrists have been bound. And so there is this sense of being completely attached and never being able to detach yourself from the way in which grief is leading you, literally just leading you to do one thing or another. And I think it's incredibly powerful. Cauldron, the Banshee, which is actually really scary. The Healer, really beautiful, with the assistance of the moon, the subconscious, and maybe the intuition. And the broom, what is the broom for? Can it take me places? Is it something that is part of who I am, and what I want to be? The voices, what are these voices? Is it something that comes from beyond the veil? Is it something that is meant to help me? Is it something that is meant to make me think? Is it a triggering things? The elders, will they give me guidance? The owl, the wisdom of the owl, and potions and spells. I love this deck so much now that I know how to use it in my own personal way. I don't mean to say that this will work for you, but if you like the aesthetics of the deck and the theme of the deck, and you don't feel like using it because of the sentences, try doing what I do, which is very obvious actually, but try because this is an amazing deck. And let's talk about another deck that I believe is underrated. Is the Macabre Tarot by, so in here it's credited as Samantha West, but Sam now goes by Sam Rook. So it's the same creator, Sam Rook, Samantha West, same person. This one was released a few years ago before they took the name Sam Rook. So I believe that obviously it wouldn't really make sense to reprint them with the new name. And I think that they probably asked them and Sam, they were okay with being called Samantha West. I think, I'm not entirely sure. This is also a Rockpool deck, by the way. I believe that people think, and I talked about this deck before, in the same way. I believe that people don't necessarily feel like using this deck because they think that it's the cute and creepy type. There's nothing cute. There's nothing cute in these characters. Trust me, nothing cute. As a matter of fact, many of these cards are actually kind of triggering for me. There's a lot of really violent, if you think about the concept of some of these cards, there's a lot of violence. I mean, some of these characters literally have daggers in their eyes. As a concept, that is incredibly violent. So it is really cute. Sorry, it's really creepy. And to me, I think that I'm also guilty of not necessarily wanting to use this deck because it took me a long time to understand where in my practice I can use it. Is it a deck that I can use for divination? It's a bit too creepy. It's a bit too probably also triggering, especially because divination, the biggest part of my divination practice is for clients and members of my channel. So of course I read for myself. Of course I read for my friends. But that's just maybe, 1/10, so 10% of everything that is related to divination for me. And on top of everything, I honestly would not use this deck for myself when it comes to divination. And unless I've been asked specifically to use this deck with a very, very specific reason, in such a way that I'm convinced that I can use this deck for somebody else, I would not necessarily propose it. So, for example, in this month, we're all, for my members' readings, we're going to use the Orion's Animal Tarot because we're actually doing a deck study on that deck. And I'm incorporating a studying of the energies of the animals represented on the deck for 2 videos. So the energies of the week videos that I published every Monday, basically. And also the readings that I do every other Saturday, because I believe that this way we can best tackle the energies represented by these animals by seeing how I use them in my practice and by seeing them at work, basically. It's not just a deck study that looks at the card and tells you the association between the tarot card and the animal, but I'm really talking about the animal energies in that case. So what I was saying is this month of October, we're only going to use that deck. But at the end of October, I'm going to give my members the possibility, at least for the month of November, to choose a dark deck if they so wish for their readings. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I feel that sometimes we also need to see how we react when there's a darker kind of reading that has been done. Obviously, if it doesn't work, we will stop. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm never really, I never am that stubborn as to never change my mind on what I'm doing. And I always listen to my members. I mean, after all, they're the ones that are supporting this channel. Without my members, I would not be able to film. Because obviously the money that I'm making thanks to my members helps me supplement my income, which means that I can keep on filming. So obviously I listen to what they say. So as I was saying, many of these cards are really kind of triggering. I'm not shying away from saying that because they are triggering for me. And I bet they are triggering for other people. Is that a reason not to use this deck? Hear me out. Hear me out. This deck is incredibly powerful. It's not just creepy for creepiness' sake. I believe that there's a lot of intention here. And by all means, think about all of the other decks created by Sam. They all come with a very distinguishable kind of art style. It is minimalist, as you can see that here. Not a lot of colors, for example. There is this contrast between the white backgrounds and the black backgrounds. But at the same time, because they're kind of minimalist, I think that Sam had to really focus on the meaning of the card. And with a few strokes, they had to reproduce that meaning in such a way that for us it would become easier to make the association. So when I use this deck, and admittedly, as I said, don't use it for divination. The backs are amazing, but I do use it for shadow work and meditation. And also, I will have to say, sometimes I use my decks just for the aesthetics. I actually have this kind of practice in which I would just look at all of the cards, and whenever I feel like one of them is particularly interesting for me, then I stop and I do some kind of meditation work on that specific card. Does that save this deck for being underrated? I don't know. Underrated to me doesn't necessarily just means that people don't understand it or they don't use it, but it also means that sometimes they might keep it as a collectible item and they might not use it to the best of its possibilities. And if that's you, if you don't find a way to use this deck at the best of its possibilities, try and do what I do. Try and just look at the cards. If you like the aesthetics, it will be easier. But look at the cards and stop whenever there is one that really tells you something that really feels like it wants you to elaborate on its meaning. And I can assure you that will help. All in all, this is a really gorgeous deck, deliciously dark. And I believe that we can work a lot more with this deck. And I want to do so in the month of Spooktober. So I'm going to have to speed up a little bit because I just realized that we're just under 1 hour and we have so many more decks to go through. Let's talk about the Halloween Forever Oracle. So this is, the artwork is JBG, Jasmine Beckett Griffith, but this has been written by Tess Whitehurst. So there's, with JBG art style, there's a few decks released by Blue Angel. And I believe that at least a few of them that I know of, the writer is actually Lucy Cavendish. I love Lucy's writing. When I compare Tess's writing and Lucy's writing, I believe that we can enjoy both of them. Personally, when I looked at this deck, I just made a clear choice. I really love this deck. I also have the Shapeshifter Oracle, or the Oracle of the Shapeshifter, which is also JBG's art style, but I believe that that one is by Lucy. But I do prefer this one. I don't know, it just resonates more with me. But I believe that this deck, because it says Halloween Forever, which is kind of a name that it's a gorgeous name, love it, absolutely love it. But at the same time, it kind of tricks you into believing that this is just a Halloween kind of deck, which is not. And I'm going to show you. So obviously the thematic is Halloween related. Obviously, we have, jack-o'-lanterns. Of course, the aesthetics, the images will be related to Halloween. But when it comes to the guidebook, when it comes to the way in which you can use this deck, I believe that there is so much more going on that really lets you do a lot of incredibly good work with this deck. So let me just show you the cards first. There is only one critic that I will always say about Blue Angels decks. Not all of them, but sometimes they do release a deck that has 98% of the cards in the portrait, portrait position. The image is in portrait position, but maybe a 2% in landscape. And so, for example, I get it that this one is gorgeous when seen like this, because obviously you need to see the coffin here. And it's really gorgeous, but it just feels like it doesn't integrate with all of the other cards. So this is Dracula's Heiress, Daughters of Night. Look how beautiful these cards are. Autumn Angel, Moon Mistress, Pumpkin Promise, Jack-o'-lantern Love. So obviously, as I said before, there's a lot of thematics related to Halloween. For the darker side of Halloween, even though the jack-o'-lantern is not supposed to be just dark. Santa Muerte, of course, and it's a really gorgeous depiction of Santa Muerte, not your traditional one, but I really like it. This one is more ironically more traditionally, the paintings on the faces that you can see during the Santa Muerte, Dia de los Muertos kind of festival. La Calavera. Calavera means skull in Spanish. The Queen of Halloween. Listen to the Dead. Amazing. Zombie Kitty and Queen. Love this card so much. And it's also because this, if my Missy came back as a zombie, she would look like this. So if you haven't watched some of my videos in which I talk about Missy, unfortunately, my 15-year-old cat passed away. And I miss her so much. I still miss her so much. I still cry. But I was thinking, so I was watching Pet Sematary, which is the adaptation in a movie of Stephen King's Pet Sematary book. So spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, if you haven't read the book, please skip ahead because I have to reveal a couple of spoilers. Otherwise I won't explain what I'm talking about. So in the book and also in the movie, there's this family that moves close to a highway, really close, like they shouldn't be building houses, that close to a highway. And as a consequence of that, unfortunately, their cat dies. And the father, so he has heard that there is a cemetery, a pet cemetery, where you can bury your pet and then it comes back as a zombie pet. It doesn't know the zombie part of the pet part. And so he does so because he doesn't want his kids to be sorry about the fact that the cat has died. And the cat comes back, but it's a zombie cat. And, it stinks, and it's not like, you can tell that the behavior is not the same, and the kids immediately can tell. And, it kind of becomes more of a nuisance rather than a pleasure to be around this cat, because there's something fundamentally wrong with it. Can I say something? I wouldn't care if I knew that that kind of pet cemetery existed. I would have buried my Missy there in order for her to come back. I do not care that she will be a zombie cat. I would still love her, and I stick to my guns. I don't care. I know that there's going to be a lot of you going, oh my God, heavens to bats, what you say. I don't care. I don't care. Just give her back. Give her back to me. I would not care one bit. Even if it was a terrible cat, even if it was scratching me and hissing and howling and growling, I do not care. I don't know. Is this grieving? I'm still grieving. Fine. So be it. But I really do believe in what I'm saying here. So, going back to the card, I love that card. The kitten, the zombie kitten, are you kidding me? That's awesome. As a matter of fact, let's just go back to that card, if you'll allow me. And I am going to read the book, what a book says about that card. So, of course, now that I'm looking for it, I couldn't find it. Yeah, here it is. So this is number 23. So let's pick the book up and go to number 23, 21, and 23. Zombie Kitty and Queen. I'm a queen. I'm a zombie queen. Maybe. Okay. Draw upon your scrappy resilience and hard-won wisdom. You've been through a lot, but you're still here. Your scars, whether visible or invisible, are not blemishes, but badges of honor. That's already winning my heart. Like the striking zombie and her adorable zombie kitty, let go of who you were and be proud of who you are. As challenging as it may have been, you cannot change the past. So you might as well acknowledge it, own it, and claim all the blessings and wisdom hidden within it. Accepting what is includes accepting what was. Wow. Once you come out of opposition to the present moment and all that has led up to it, you are free to rise on the stepping stones of your prior incarnations and ordeals. And it goes on, obviously. Do you see what I mean? This is not necessarily a deck that it's not one of those novelty decks that you just want to use for Halloween. It is one of those decks that, yes, it is on the darker side, absolutely 100%, but that's exactly what I'm saying about all of these decks today. It's just that, to me, because they call it the Halloween Forever, it's a kind of a misnomer. I don't know how else I would have called this deck, but Halloween Forever probably made a lot of people think that this is a novelty deck that should only be used at times like Halloween. So, trust me, if you only use it for Halloween, you do you, of course. Of course you do you. But you're missing out. You're missing out because this is an incredibly powerful deck. And I will always say this about JBG's artwork. I honestly cannot envision a light deck illustrated by JBG. To me, these figures with really wide faces and really widely spaced eyes and wide eyes as well. I don't know. It feels like it's a kind of those really creepy dolls that sometimes you see in, oddities and curiosities kind of shops. You know what I mean? And because of that, it is kind of difficult for me to think that it could be a light deck. Even I look at this figure, for example, Hecate's butterflies, and it still looks creepy to me, but it's a good creepy. It's a gorgeous creepy. It's a delicious kind of creepy. So please try and see whether you can use this deck outside of Halloween, because it will really give you a lot to think about. Okay, now moving back towards the tarot decks, the Omega Land, I realized just now that I told you a lie earlier when I said that all of these decks are still available for purchase. I happen to know that unfortunately the Omega Land is not available for purchase anymore. It has not been, it's one of those decks that unfortunately, it's a used games deck. And they probably thought that it was not selling or performing as well as they wanted it to. And unfortunately, they stopped renewing the contract, and it has not been reprinted after. I believe that there might still be a few copies in circulation, especially when you look into a Facebook group or eBay or Etsy. Please be sure 100% that the deck you're purchasing is legitimate and not a counterfeit. Please, I'm begging you, it's incredibly important. Otherwise, the whole industry suffers from it. And also, let me tell you something, a counterfeit deck, bad juju. Bad juju. Obviously, it happens to everyone. I'm not saying that people are doing it on purpose. Some of them are. I purchased once a deck that I really thought it was 100% legit. It's not. And I never used it. Actually, I tried sending it back. It was on eBay. They never answered. I don't want to destroy because I don't think that I have the energy to do something like that. Destroying books or destroying a deck is incredibly painful for me, but I just, I don't use it. I keep it there and that's it. So the Omega Land. What is the Omega Land? I know that there's a lot of people that might say that it's a bit confusing because this is also a game deck. So you can actually use it in a game. And it explains everything here. I forgot to mention it, but these cards here, they literally tell you how to use it for a game. And literally here, for example, it tells you, if you draw the Justice card, play immediately after an opponent takes a trick to play the first card of the next trick. Draw a new major card. So it really tells you how to use it. It feels like it's a complex kind of game. To be honest with you, I never tried to use it as a game. To me, it's an incredibly witty kind of deck. The idea is of a dystopian future in which, whatever plague humans can think of has happened, and there's only a few humans left that are trying to survive. So it's kind of a survivalist kind of deck. It doesn't necessarily feel like there's zombies. There are no zombies, actual zombies here, but it reminds me so much of, for example, if you think about The Walking Dead, to me, this looks a lot like The Walking Dead, kind of a deck about The Walking Dead without the zombies. If you think about The Last of Us, this to me looks like a deck depicting the characters from The Last of Us minus the humans affected by the fungus. So there's a number of things that you can relate to when looking at the cards. I particularly like this deck because, as I said, it does have a very sassy attitude. When I use it, I actually do use it for readings. And when I do use it, it's kind of incredible. Look at this moon card, for example. It's a kind of an incredible deck. It is actually based on the RWS, so it is easy, let's say, to read it. But at the same time, you need to take on the perspective of these survivors. And that is not necessarily an easy thing to do because, it's not necessarily something that belongs to anyone's kind of experience. As far as I know, we haven't had a zombies invasion yet. So we don't necessarily know how we would react to that. But this is really sassy. It's a really sassy deck. And if you don't like the art style, I know that it's not for everyone. I completely get it. But if you have this deck, you don't feel like using it, because you don't like the art style, try and use it for a reading. Actually try and read with it. You will see the personality emerging immediately. And it's, as I said, it's a very sassy kind of personality, which makes it a kind of a funny thing to do reading with this deck. So I highly recommend it. If you have it, If you don't have it, you want to search for it, I'm sure that someone will be, willing to part ways with it if you post an ISO on Facebook, or if you search for it on eBay. And the next deck is an Oracle deck, as I promised. This is the Dark Magic Oracle, Reveal the Light Within. So this one has been illustrated by Jessa Beya, but it's a deck by Fiona Horn. And released by Rockpool. So I have a few decks by Fiona. I love all of them. I think that Fiona's writing style really resonates with me. And because of that, I'm actually looking forward whenever I hear that there's a new release and Fiona's the writer, I actually looking forward to that deck because so far she's been always delivering for me. And obviously that is personal, but there's other reasons why people can like this deck. And I believe that Jessa Beya's illustrations are incredibly powerful. So this is obviously, it's called the Dark Magic Oracle, so you know already what to expect when it comes to the thematics, let's say. This deck, to me, feels like if you read horror books, Isabel Canya's books, they have the covers of Isabel Canya's books are very similar. They give me the same vibes as these cards. I hope it makes sense. They're incredibly beautiful. All of the clothes are very sumptuous, very luxurious. It feels almost as if they are modern, but they have the same kind of luxury you can find in a 17th or 18th century kind of high society countess kind of gown, for example. They are very powerful, very beautiful, very intense, and I will have to say, be careful. Some of these cards may actually be triggering. You do your own research, of course. This is incredibly powerful for me. This card that is actually called Consent, and look at the image. Know your boundaries. That's it is a bit disturbing. I mean, let's face it, we can be honest. Many of these cards will be, but it is the Dark Magic deck. I mean, we kind of expected that, didn't we? But many of them will be absolutely gorgeous. Look at this one, Greenie. You are a natural. Really, really love this. Many of this, it also reminds me a little bit of Elizabeth on Earth. If Elizabeth on Earth were done, which is an Oracle deck, but it's indie. You can find it on Etsy. If that deck were done under a dark lens, it would look like this. So there is a bit of a surrealist element to the images that I always appreciate anyway. And that surrealism can actually lead you one or two ways. It could be creepy, or it could creepy and let's say not recognizable, not evocative, not resonating. Creepy, surrealist for me is something that your mind tries to understand and it fails to do so. So it cannot be triggering because you don't recognize the images, or it could be creepy, but also easy to recognize because maybe the surrealist element are dialed down to a minimum. So you still understand what's going on in the card. And because it's really dark, it is really creepy. So, I mean, sorry, I'm just, every single one of these cards is incredibly powerful. Look at this one, Evolve. It's okay to grow. Infinity, Mountain. Look at this one, Mirror, Reflect Yourself. Coincidentally, pairing up the Somnia Tarot with this deck, oh my God. Be aware, yes, it's on the darker side. Of course it is, because the Somnia itself, it is kind of dark, and with all the shrouds and everything, and the ropes around their necks and everything. If you pair it up with this deck, just expect it to be a very dark kind of combo. It is. But it's also really cool. I mean, I love it. And on top of everything, to me, there's something to be said about the possibility and the capability the skill of proposing a very triggering, a very intense and powerful image, but at the same time, it delivers. Because it delivers, it does. A choice, your decision will be correct. Brave, don't self-sabotage. Wow. Tribe, find your people. This, when you use it with the Somnia, it looks like it's actually done from Nicholas Bruno, which is the author, the photographer of the Somnia Tarot. Sonnet, express your creative heart. Collective, trust the goodness in others. Identity, make your own choices. And by the way, this is the same card as we've seen earlier, where the person actually goes through the mirror. So there's also sequentials that you can read, from one card to the other. Empower, trust your inner vision. Reveal, express the real you. Just reveal those wings, because they're part of yourself. I know that there's a lot. So rock pool is, I don't know, it's a churning machine. They just spit out decks practically every week. And 90% of rock pool decks are oracle decks. So I kind of understand I can see how people would miss out on 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 of rock pool decks, especially when it comes to oracle decks, because there's so many. But this one, please don't skip on this one, because especially when you do like darker decks, this is it. This is gorgeous. Really, really powerful. And we're moving back to tarot decks. So I am going to show you this one, which is in a really beautiful bag made by the Tarot Bag Ladies. Absolutely love it. Really, really cute. And the reason I use the bag is because I actually really love, this is the Shadowline Tarot by Monica Budishki. I really like it. I really think that it's one of those decks that it's supposed to be cute and creepy, but to me, the cute part is 90% and the creepy part is 10. So it is a really cute deck for me. I really love this deck so much. There's some elements that are recurring. So the big empty eye orbs that are supposed to be creepy, but at the same time, to me, it's just another cute element to the figures here. It is also, sorry. You see, I cannot stop laughing. When I look at the images, I actually think that they're so campy. There you go. That's the adjective that I was looking for. You know how, if you're a horror movie fan, you will know what I mean by campy. Also horror books. Campy is over the top. Campy is when the first 3 seconds of a scene in a horror movie, of the first maybe 3 paragraphs in a horror scene in a book, feel really creepy and dark and terrible and terrifying and scary and everything. But then because it goes on, it exaggerates, it becomes over the top, that's when it becomes campy. And that's where your suspension of disbelief stops, because you're like, oh, come on. And for example, if you watch Weapons, it's quite recent. It's a horror movie, quite recent. I loved it. I really loved it. So there is a scene, spoiler alert again, please skip ahead if you haven't watched it, because this is literally a spoiler. So spoiler alert, Weapons, switch, move ahead at least, let's say 5 minutes into the video. So there is a scene in which towards the end, the witch has actually bewitched the junkie guy, and he's inside the home, inside the house, and Josh Brolin is inside and he wants to find his son. And so the witch has bewitched the junkie guy, and so this guy literally attacks Josh Brolin's character. And Josh Brolin is really he's really big guy. It's so obvious. And the other guy is very thin. So Josh Brolin just has to punch him in the face once and the guy goes down. But then because he's bewitched, he comes back and he jumps back up and he attacks him again and he punches him down. And then he attacks him again. And then he punches him down. And then he attacks him again. And then he punches, and so on and so forth. And he goes on and on. So the first couple of times you're like, oh yeah, no, I can see that. Oh, I hope that it doesn't hurt him. You're actually in with the rhythm, and you're okay with the fact that, a couple of times knock down and jump back up, it can actually make sense. You can actually see that happening. And then 3 times, and then 4 times, and then 5 times. And that's where you start laughing, because it's also combined with the fact that the junkie guys keeps on screaming. And, and after a while, you kind of expect it. So there is this mechanism in humor, which is called expectation. Repetition causes expectation, and expectation causes laughter. So it is, Charlie Chaplin was actually talking about that. Charlie Chaplin that loses his hat and picks it back up, and he loses his hat and picks it back up, and he loses his hat and picks it back up, and so on and so forth. So the repetition can actually become over the top, and that's when it becomes funny. And that is literally what I can see here. So this is, if it were only 1 or 2 cards like this, it would be creepy, but because it's all of them, it becomes campy and it becomes funny. Sorry, even the 9 of Swords. I mean, very justice card with a massive spider and smaller spiders, on top of me when I'm sleeping in the darkness. This will be incredibly jarring for me because I do have arachnophobia, but because there's a lot of these characters, very, very similar ones in all of the cards, I'm already okay with this, and it actually makes me laugh. So it's a way to exercise, and this looks like the character from Ring, the movie. So it's a way to exercise something really scary, I believe. So it's, I really think that Monica has done a fantastic job with this deck. And it's underrated because I really don't understand why I don't see it more often. Maybe because it reads really weird. That I have to be honest about. It reads really weird. But I don't mind a weird reading. I'm okay with it. I mean, every now and then it's actually kind of fun. So if you have this deck, just pay attention to it, look at it, read with it. It will give you a fantastic experience. And moving on to another Oracle deck, this one. So this is the Cries of the Souls Oracle. I've talked twice in my channel about this deck. The first time was when I did the unboxing and the first impressions, and I was completely gutted. Yeah, I was completely gutted. If you remember, if you watched that video, you will remember my reaction. I'm not going to talk about it. The card that I pulled just as a sample, went straight to all of my traumas, all of the things that still hurt. It just literally killed me. So yeah. What I have to say about this is I still don't see it used. I don't see it on Instagram. I don't see it on YouTube, on TikTok. I think that it's unfortunate because it might be due to the fact that the art style is really simple, really minimalist, and not necessarily pretty. This is by far not the prettiest deck in my collection. It's not that I don't like the art style. It's just that I think that it's so minimalist that I don't even look at it. Does that make sense? However, when you start reading not just the title and the sentence at the bottom of the card, but actually the guidebook, that's where this deck really shines. It took me a while to accept it, and let me explain why. Because it is very confrontational. So if I'm dealing with an issue, for example, I don't necessarily want to be told the truth in a very harsh way. I get it that I'm an adult and, I'm a big girl and I should be able to take it, but sometimes it just hurts. And there is a sense of survival that we all abide to. And sometimes when something hurts, we just want to step away from it, right? So it took me a while. It took me a while to accept it. It took me a while to accept the incredibly direct way in which this deck is addressing something. If it resonates with you, if you are dealing with one of the issues these cards deal with, I can assure you 100% that you will be hurt. It's just that sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it's necessary. I don't know how else to explain it. The self-sabotage card. I mean, let me just, let's just do some kind of a, let's try something out, okay? I'm just going to pull a card. And we're going to read out of the guidebook, because I believe that this deck is underrated. People don't necessarily know how powerful this is. And it's a pity, because listen, if you're just a tarot collector and you don't use tarot in your practice, fine. This is not a collectible item. I get it. But if you do use tarot in your practice, if you believe that tarot can actually help you, tarot and oracle, can actually help you become a better person, or it can help you go through some stuff, you need to know about this deck. There's no two ways around that. So let's see. I'm just going to pull a card. Wish me luck, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. So let's see. Okay, so let's just, I don't know. I'm almost scared. Let's go here. Dependency forever. I build healthy foundations for myself and others. So this is tricky, because one thing about this deck, the sentence at the bottom of the cards is always positive. But then you read the entry in the guidebook, and that's where it becomes really triggering. So let's go. This is card number 9. I don't know about this card. I haven't pulled it for myself. I don't know what it says, but I know. Sorry, number 6, 8, and 9. Okay, dependency. So it tells you the same. I build healthy foundations for myself and others. And then when I am present, you feel incapable of existing on your own. Do you see what I mean? When I am present, you feel incapable of existing on your own. You need others to validate you, so you feel worthy. Okay. I chain you to the outside world, and you become a prisoner, needing others to see you so you can move forward. I am often the result of abandonment wounds, and when you try to keep them at bay, I arise before you. I make you believe you cannot be original or set personal boundaries. You see disagreement as a terrible mistake you must correct, and give other people the power to hurt you. Recovering your freedom seems completely impossible, and is something you devote all your strength to escaping. So then, it gets a little bit better. The supplement, it tells you how to fix that. It's still really direct, but at least, it's not just a triggering deck for the sake of triggering you. It actually wants to heal you. So that part, at least, I kind of appreciate. Warning, and we need to read the warning and moving forward. That's the part in which, it helps you to move forward, literally. So as you can see, I completely understand that, there's people that say, I don't like it, it's not for me, and it's absolutely fine. However, you owe it to yourself to try and see whether something like this is actually healing for you, if you're going through something. Because I can promise you that once I stopped feeling attacked by this deck and I started understanding what it was telling me, I immediately started healing. It's not for everyone, but I believe that it's underrated, because people just look at the aesthetics, or they feel that they've been attacked by the deck and they just don't feel like using it. This, I know that it sounds like in a perverted way. I actually look forward to use it when I have an issue, because it always delivers, and it is really underrated, trust me. Okay, it's been a long time, but I am down to 3 decks, so stay with me. The next one is very well known, very well liked, but I feel still underrated. It's the Devia Moon Borderless Edition. Mine edition is the Borderless Edition by Patrick Valenza. This is a US games deck, but upon request from Patrick, they actually this is a slightly different format, so it's narrow and longer cards. I also have the coffee table book, or the art style book, about the creation of the this deck. Patrick is an artist and is incredibly proud of his work, and he should be, because it's absolutely amazing. But it is the Sappho Nightmare, literally, because it's actually taking inspiration from some of his nightmares. So literally the stuff on nightmares. And I just think that people stop at the aesthetics again. People stop at the aesthetics because this is a really weird deck. I mean, let's face it, let's be honest, all of the characters on these cards are rather creepy and weird, and they have, 3 arms, or they have really... Let me just set this card aside because I want to talk about it. They have, arms instead of legs, legs instead of the arms. They have 3 breasts. They have, a face that looks like a moon. They have 2 faces in the same face, and then 6 hands, and so on and so forth. And obviously, and look at this one. This is really creepy. I get it. It's really creepy. So I don't mean to say that this deck is underrated in the fact that people don't have it. I feel like there's a lot of us that have it in our collections, and it feels more and more like it will become a collectible item if they stop publishing it. However, I feel that when it comes to reading with this deck, people don't necessarily believe that they can get good readings out of it. Now, again, it is a darker deck, so obviously, as a consequence, readings with this deck will be on the darker side. But this is an incredibly powerful deck. The meanings behind the cards are just mind-blowing. And, we all know it. So let's talk about this card. Let's talk about the death card. So what is this? What's going on here? What is it? What is it? So this is actually a mother. This is the mother of this child. Okay. And the mother is actually pushing the child down. The child is reaching out to the mother. Now, if you read what it says about this card, you will see that the child is not just reaching for the mother like any child would. The child wants to go back into the wound of the mother, but the mother is already pregnant with another child. And so she's pushing down the child. Now, as creepy as that might sound, the meaning behind the card, and Patrick has written something amazing about this card, is that the mother is also trying and be compassionate towards the child, because she knows that life will not be kind to her child. And so she doesn't want to coddle the child, and she wants the child to understand that life is going to be tough. And you cannot, every time that life is tough, you cannot just try and go back into the safety of your mother's womb, because you won't have the possibility to do so. And so she wants the child, she wants to teach the child. And it's heartbreaking for the mother. It's not like she actually feels pleasure in, refusing or rejecting her own child. This is heartbreaking, because any mother's feelings will be to protect their own children any way possible. But this is a teaching moment. And so there is that sense of associated with the death card that tells you that there is a conclusion to the sense of being protected, and there is the opening, so the ending of your possibility to still be under your mother's wing, the protection of your mom, or the safety of the womb. But there is also a beautiful thing, because at the same time, that means that you can start being your own person. So I really love this card, and I can assure you that all of these cards are as deep as this one. This is just an example that I wanted to tell you, because I think that is very striking, also visually. But so this deck is underrated for me, not because people don't have it. I do believe that it's one of the, probably, it's a mass market deck, so you can find it anywhere. But do they all read with it? And do they all use the meanings? And do they all know the meaning as written in the guidebook and in the coffee table book? I don't know about that. I honestly don't think so. It took me a while to find the time to actually go through both the little white book and the coffee table book. And trust me, that was really eye-opening as an experience, because it was actually very it felt like I was actually participating with Patrick, and I could be a witness of his creative process, which is incredible. So this is a gorgeous deck, and trust me, it reads incredibly well, but of course it is one of the darker decks. And another Oracle deck. Now, the Horror Oracle, this is about monsters. And again, probably because of this, so this is by Riccardo Disegno, and the publishing company is Chronicle Books, I believe. Yeah, it looks like it is. So I'm not very familiar with this publishing company. It is one of those decks that has a drawer kind of internal compartment. I don't necessarily like this, but at least it's not at the bottom. I do have a deck that has a drawer compartment at the bottom, that opens from the bottom. So you can imagine every time I pick it up, it falls down. Anyway, so I have to store it upside down. This one at least is at the top, and I really appreciate that. So this is another example of a deck that I believe it's underrated because of the theme and the aesthetics, but actually is an incredibly deep deck, and it does come with a very interesting guidebook. You can see it here, this one here. This one really gives you, it doesn't go too deep into the meanings, but first and foremost, it does explain what the scene is depicted on the card, because you don't see it on the card. Sorry, this is upside down. So you don't see it on the card. This is the Exorcist, and I just know that because I know the Exorcist really well. And it's iconic in the depiction of the, that is something that will help you. Whenever he is depicting one movie or another, or a story, etc., or a character, it will use the most iconic moments of that movie in order for you to understand and make the connection immediately. So that helps. But it doesn't say the Exorcist here, but it does connect, let's say, the dots between the movie or the scene or the character depicted on the card and the meaning of the card. So help me, for example. How powerful is that? Thinking about the movie itself. And when you do go into the guidebook, it does tell you, okay, so this is, obviously I would have known that it was from Jaws, but it tells you, directed by Steven Spielberg in 1975, which is actually the 50th this year. So I was actually able to go to the movies and watch Jaws. I never had that before, because I obviously wasn't able to watch it in 1975. It's been an amazing experience, because I believe they actually restored the film. So it was really brilliantly done. And wow, the characters, amazing. I mean, I knew about the story and everything, but what an amazing performance by all the actors. I really, really loved it. Close parenthesis. You're going to need a bigger boat. So this is one of the sentences that, one of the lines in the movie. I really love that they give you the possibility also to connect this. And then it tells you experts and authorities can prove unreliable. If you know the movie, you know what this is referring to, especially when their status, reputation, or self-regard factor into their actions. When made aware of a deeper problem lurking below our surface perceptions, the first instinct may be to seek such help. Even so, it may ultimately be up to us to blow this thing out of the water. See, it's very witty, because obviously you need to know about what happens in the movie, but this is really witty. It's a really, very intelligent way to make the connection between the meaning of the card and what happens in the movie. So there's also a couple of keywords, upright and reverse. Upright, it says preparation is key, your own preparation most of all. And reverse, no better way to get your feet wet than to dive right in. Again, a reference to the movie. It's really brilliant when it comes to these kind of things. It does that for each and every one of these cards. And I do believe that because it is obviously a novelty, it's seen as something that it's It's not necessarily going really deep, but this will give you an incredible knowledge of the characters, the movie/books, and also an incredible way to use this deck in your practice because of how deep it goes into the meanings. Cujo, for example, directed by Louis Teague in 1983, Who Let the Monster Out of My Closet? An illness of other life disruption can be restricted, making us feel confined by limitation it has imposed. Being in its grip can also drive out of character behavioral changes. It's important to keep compassion for ourselves and others who may be struggling, but it's also vital to protect ourselves from harmful situations that are beyond our control. So really, really cool. I really love it. I think that it is essential for you when you use it to actually refer to the book. Also because it's actually really well written. And I do believe that it's underrated. It's underrated because people just stop. And myself as well, when I bought it, I didn't know anything about the guidebook. I didn't know that it was so brilliant. I bought it because I loved the art style. I loved the depiction. I loved the images. I loved the fact that it was based on movies, which is my favorite genre, of course. So I really wanted a deck like this. But I do believe that Rosemary's Baby, that we should not stop at that. Blair Witch Project. Wow. And I'm rewatching these movies this month, so I'm really excited. I am going to rewatch the Blair Witch Project, even though when I watched it the first time, I believe I may have been in London, I don't remember, but it was really, really overwhelming for me. I was so scared. I was really, really scared. And it, for example, very recognizable, you know, the clown and Georgie and the paper boat. So absolutely love this deck. And if you do have it, please don't stop at the images. Again, this is Ring, for example. So I was doing it myself, but once I started reading the book, I actually finally understood how deep this deck is and how helpful it is in reading the Babadook. Fantastic. By the way, I believe it's an Australian movie, The Babadook. Yeah. Toni Collette. I could be wrong. Sorry. It looks like Toni Collette. Let me just, I believe it's an Australian movie. I have watched it many years ago. So it's directed by Jennifer Kent in 2014. You'll see him if you look. If you watch the movie, you wouldn't know what that means. So really, how should I say this? Don't stop at the novelty of the deck. Go deeper if you can, if you have the time, of course, because it will give you a lot. And we made it to the last one. It's almost 2 hours. So last but not least, this is the Zombie Tarot. I know that everyone has this deck, but do you use it? Do you use it for divination? Do you use it in your personal practice? Do you use it for any kind of work? Because let me tell you, this deck reads really well. Like it may give you the idea because it's very whimsical. I mean, let's face it, of course, it's very whimsical. But because of that, it may give you the idea that it's not a serious deck. But oh my God, I mean, the experiences, the readings that I got out of this deck were really blowing my mind. There's a lot to be said about being able to create a tarot deck that is incredibly dark, incredibly funny, incredibly whimsical, cute and creepy at the same time, and also that reads really well. This is, to me, it takes an additional skill. I will always love, for example, I don't know, decks by Travis McHenry. I think that is a fantastic writer. Louis Shipman. I would love, obviously, decks by Anna Torian, whether she's writing the book or also just illustrating. But I believe that when you need to create something like this, you need an additional skill. You need something more because it is so easy to just make it a novelty deck and not necessarily, give it that flair that will help a reader bond with the deck. Because decks like this, more often than not, people would just buy them because they're funny to look at, because the images are very clever, by the way, incredibly clever. The Eight of Cups, yeah, of course, you have to move away from that, but there'll still be, and all of these zombies try and catch up to you. So it's just brilliant, because the Eight of Cups for me is like, okay, you tried your best to fix something that didn't want to get fixed. And you got to the point in which you're heartbroken, but you say, you know what? There's nothing that can be done. And I'm just moving. I'm leaving. I'm moving on. I'm moving away. I'm just leaving something broken behind. And it's a good thing to do, because sequentially, remember that then it falls the Nine of Cups and then the Ten of Cups. Some of the most beautiful cards on the deck. So you might be heartbroken on the Eight of Cups, but it's something necessary for you to do. And, you see this one here, and obviously it's a shopping mall, and, all of these zombies, and this character's like, well, okay, she's perfect because she is dressed like the Stepford wife of the 60s, 50s and 60s, and she's got a couple of suitcases here, and she's also wearing high heels. So I don't think that she'd be able to run, but she's just looking back for the last time and saying, you know what, I have to go anyway. So it is really, really cool. And the hermit, for example, I'm just gonna cuddle up on my couch and reading a book with chocolate. And I know that there's a lot of zombies outside my very own window, and they're trying to get in, but this is a me moment, and I'm not gonna let anything distract me from that. So it is very powerful, very interesting, very powerful, very well done, absolutely brilliant when it comes to the choice of what to show you for each and every one of these cards. And the associations between the images and the meaning of the cards themselves is absolutely nothing short of brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. I love the devil card with the cigarette dispenser. It's just amazing. Again, this might be one of those decks that people may tend to have in their collections, but they don't necessarily use them because they think that it's just a novelty deck. And in that way, it is underrated. This is one of the deepest decks that I've got in my collections, and I highly recommend it. And that was it for today. And you're a trooper if you're still with me. Thank you so much. This has been a really long video, but I just love talking about my decks. There's nothing else that I can do. So if you're still here, thank you so much. And I will see you next time. Bye.